Hello everyone, and in this video I'm going to be going over another fairly unique desktop pet, and that is the TOMY Mutsu Water Looper, or as the US version is called, the Mutsu the Curious Little Fish. So this pet is a simple yet fairly impressive desktop pet that aims to be to a water life pet as what the Ants Life Studio is to an ant farm. So as I mentioned, we've got the US release, The Curious Little Fish, and the Japanese release, which is called Mutsu Water Looper. It got two versions in Japan, so we've got the first one, which is the one that I have, as well as a round bowl that has a remote control and also functionality where they can interact between each other. Tinkerville has details on all the versions. I will only be showing off the version that I have, which is the first generation of the Mutsu Water Looper from Japan. So I'll link that website in the description, so you'll be able to see more from that website, but in terms of this video, I'll only be covering the one that I actually have. So, when you first get your Mutsu Water Looper, it's a very exciting moment in your life. So in the box, you get various plastic bits and bobs that need to be put together in this little enclosure. There's also your Mutsu, which differs depending on the version. The version that I have is this cute little penguin guy. So these little bits and bobs that are put together are kind of not put together super well. You kind of have to like slot them on, and sometimes when you move it, the little enclosure collapses because it's not like, it doesn't slot in super well, which means it's fine. It means it's easy to disassemble if you want to store it somewhere. But very annoying if you ever want to move it. But in any case, it's also hard to move because it's full of water. So the Mutsu character itself has no batteries, works on the unit having a little magnet which causes the character to move along on its wheel when you've filled the little enclosure up with water. It actually looks pretty good, and I was surprised by how simple the mechanism is. It just kind of zips along and is pulled by this little magnet, and because there's water there, it makes it kind of move smoothly rather than like a toy with a wheel being moved by a magnet underneath it. So it actually got a pretty cool effect. So while the Mutsu character, the little figure, doesn't have batteries, the Mutsu Water Looper enclosure actually has 3 C batteries, which aren't super common as household objects anymore, but can be picked up from anywhere that sells batteries. It's not super hard to get them from a shop. You just might not have some in the house like you would AAA or AA, like what other virtual pets will have, like what the Ants Life Studio has. This is completely different to that. You might actually have to go out and go buy batteries for the first time in probably ever, if you're like me and just have piles of batteries for your various virtual pets. So once you put everything together, which as I mentioned is kind of easier said than done with those barriers for the enclosure, you can pour the water up to the line and turn on your Mutsu. For its first use, you may have to press the reset button at the front. I did before it did anything, but it might just come to life straight away. So I'm not sure. The instructions do say that you have to press the reset button when you first run, so I'm not sure there, but I had to, but maybe you don't if it's not the first run. But anyway, so at first your Mutsu will be very shy, which is a kind of cute little realistic touch. You'll go to feed it by using one of the 3 buttons, and it'll kind of run a little slightly close to you, and then it'll squeak and then run back in this little cave enclosure part at the back, which is kind of cute. Like, you have to kind of earn its trust. So you've got those 3 buttons to feed and interact with it, and as you feed it and interact with it, it'll sort of be braver and come closer to you and leave its little enclosure for more reasons than just the fact that you're feeding it. Which, yeah, is kind of a realistic touch there. It feels like it's alive rather than an electronic thing that kind of just squeaks loudly at you, and it is loud. So you will feed it, and then other ways that you can interact with it besides these 3 little buttons is you can also interact with it via the sound sensor. So if you clap, 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 or you talk to it, it'll squeak at you and do various things. You can kind of get to know it, and it can kind of get to know you. And there's also a light sensor, so you can cover that up and wave to it and kind of go near it, and it'll kind of know that it's depending on how light it is, it sort of senses that you're near because the it'll sense it on a little light sensor. So that's pretty cool too. You can cover it and it'll react to that. Something that is pretty annoying about it, and I'll just turn it on so you can hear how loud it is, because it is so loud. So it'll make different noises. So my Mutsu's kind of familiar with me now, so it'll actually come up close. But it is so loud. And especially when you have it on your desk, which it's a desktop pet, it'll just be making noises at you all the time. It doesn't always make noises throughout the day. Sometimes you do have interact with it, but it's really cute though. So that's kind of a fun thing, that it is super loud. However, and there's two reasons why it's loud. One, the noises it makes, and two, the little mechanism underneath it. I'm going to turn that off, and hopefully it stays off. So it doesn't have any form of sound control, which is kind of annoying. But if you turn it off, the Mutsu should run back to its little enclosure, little barrier, to have like a sleep. So you're effectively pausing it, and once you turn it on again, it'll save the all the data that you've had from previous, which is probably why they want to have you reset it on your first run of it. So that's kind of cool, but there's no sound control. You can turn it on, you can turn it off, but you can't mute it or unmute it or lower the volume, which means that it's super loud. I get that it's loud because, as I mentioned, you can also hear the mechanism whirring when the Mutsu's moving around, so they kind of want to have it louder than the mechanism. So that makes sense. But if you do have it on your desk, it can be kind of annoying because it's sometimes constantly screaming. It just makes noises. It makes little bubble noises. It makes high-pitched ee noises. It kisses the little fish friend that it has in there in the enclosure. It makes various noises, so it would have been nice if it had some form of sound control, as sometimes I want to have it interacting with me, but I necessarily don't want it to be super duper loud. It doesn't need to have, like, you know, a volume control where you can turn it soft or loud. It'd just be nice to have the option to mute it, because I still want to interact with it. And most virtual pets, and I'm pretty sure 99% of them, except for the Mutsu, have some form of sound on and off. This does not. So that's something that's a little bit annoying. So something that is cool, and this is why I guess some of the sounds are so loud and so detailed, is that there's different things that your Mutsu wants depending on the noises that it makes. The manual comes with a little printout which has the various different types of noise that your Mutsu will make and what that means. So it'll have like a bit of a drawing about what the pitch sounds like depending on what it wants, depending on what it needs, and depending on how it's feeling and how much it likes you and what it's saying. So that's kind of cool. It's like a little dictionary of things that it's saying to you. Super sweet little thing. So the noises are fine, just it would be nice to have some kind of control over that noise. So the sound does make it a kind of annoying desk pet, as maybe you don't want it to have it screaming at you the whole time, and you can't just put it to bed without turning it off like you can with other virtual pets. So it's more or less required that you turn it off overnight. You don't let it running like you do with the other desktop pets, such as the Ants Life Studio, which I mentioned earlier. You actually should turn it off overnight, because otherwise it'll just start screaming throughout the night. And since you can't mute it like you can with the Ants Life Studio, I would not recommend having it running during the night. So that's something. Now, as I mentioned, the Mutsu figure itself isn't powered, and it's just moved by the little magnet mechanism underneath it, which is super cool. However, if the figure ever moves off its track at all, it means that it won't be carried back to behind its barrier when it's done whatever it's doing. The mechanism will move, but if the Mutsu figure's not on the track or over the mechanism, it'll just kind of sit there. Now, this does happen, not super common, but common enough that I'm going to mention it, and that's that the fins, and some of the Mutsu figures have more detailed fins and more, stick out a little bit more than the others, and that will be, it'll run past something and kind of, it'll hit it in a way that it'll just be knocked slightly off its track. So it won't be able to be carried via the mechanism to where it needs to be. So sometimes if it's not picked back up by the mechanism or by the magnet, you will have to put it back where it needs to be. I usually just pop it behind the cave at the very back there, and that'll kind of put it back on it. And that does sort of take me out of it, like, oh yes, it is just a figure on a magnet rather than an actual little virtual pet fish desktop pet thing. So that's kind of annoying. I did also have Mutsu trip over once, which might have been to do with how much water I had in. You need to have a very specific amount of water. You can have too much, or you can have too little. And of course, being it's water, it does sort of evaporate over a while, and you don't kind of want stagnant water anyway, so you probably want to change it every so often. So you'll want to make sure there's a very specific amount of water, because too much will kind of make it float in the back areas, and too little will have it at the risk of being stranded at the top if there's not enough water for it to float by, because the water kind of carries it and helps it move along its track. But that's just to do with the fact that it's a water-based pet, which is very cool. I do like the fact that it has the water that makes it feel more lifelike, and again, the water makes it move pretty smoothly. It feels fairly realistic as a pet, and I'm a big fan of that. The actions that it makes are really cute. As I mentioned, there's a little printout that shows you what different things mean. That's super, super cute, even if the noises are really loud. So I'm a big fan of that. So as I mentioned, continued noise throughout the night means that you'll have to basically only have it on when you're interacting with it, which is fine because you probably don't want to go out and buy more C batteries all the time. But in general, I really love it. Also, this is fine because it's a desktop pet. It's expecting you not to really move it, and that's clear because it's got the off button, which is fairly easy to just switch off and it'll still remember exactly where it is. You don't set like a day or time or anything like on other virtual pets, so it's kind of expected that you will just only have it on when you're playing with it, like a traditional toy rather than a virtual pet that's a simulator. But also it doesn't really require the date and time, just because the only gameplay is that it becomes friendlier with you. It doesn't starve, it doesn't die, it doesn't age, it doesn't evolve. So it doesn't really need those functionality of it being time-based. The food just makes it friendlier with you. And the different ways you interact also make it friendlier with you. So it doesn't really need care. It's just kind of like a friendship simulator with this little desktop friend in water. Because there's water, however, it does mean that it's kind of harder to move. I would pick, like any other virtual pets, when I do these kind of videos, I edit in the footage of me playing with and unboxing it, and then I might also, like, you know, pick it up and show it to the world. But I can't really do it with this one because I'm scared that it'll drop water all over my computer and electronics, and I don't want to do that. So you'll just have to live with me editing in the footage of me playing with it. It is very cool. The other reason I'm scared to pick it up is, as I mentioned, the bits and bobs kind of fall out of place if you move it too much. So that's kind of annoying. It kind of just falls in on itself. I'm not sure if that's just me or I just struggled to put it together. Yeah, overall, it's a very sweet little desktop pet. It's simple, and as I mentioned, the only care factor is that it takes time to warm up to you, and at the start just keeps on running away from you. It makes it realistic, it makes it cute, and it's so nice. It's such a nice little cute, low maintenance, low care required virtual pet, and it's just a nice thing to keep on your desk to keep you happy. It feels a lot like a real animal, even though it doesn't have the needs that a virtual pet or a real animal has. So it's something I would recommend to someone who wants a pet, but might be too busy for one, and one that you can just kind of turn off whenever you're not going to be in their room. It's super cute. They're not super hard to find, but they're not super easy to find either. In my case, they didn't release in Australia, and I had to get one from Japan. I'm not sure if the situation is different if you're looking for a US one, but I had to find mine in an auction on, I think it was Yahoo auctions for memory, but might have been Rakuten, but I can't remember. But in any case, I used From Japan to bid on it, which is just a proxy site. I've mentioned it lots of times before, and that's also how I got a lot of my virtual pets, such as my Ants Life Studio. So in general, love this virtual pet. Ease of use is a 10. Obviously, there's no gameplay really, except for it just kind of sits there. There's no difficulty of you have to feed it or it dies. There's no difficulty in terms of the amount of care you give it as it evolves. It's literally just a little figure that moves around in the water. Enjoyment is... It's actually still... I actually do enjoy it quite a lot. I'm going to have to give it like a... I don't know, like an 8 on the basis that it does really take it out of you when... Like the immersion of it when you have to put it back on its track, because it's just... It's... I'm just going to see if I can take this off. Yeah. So if it hits one of these little, I think it's meant to be seaweed, a little tree or something, it just hits that, and because it kind of is shaped like this, it'll hit it and then it'll be knocked off its little magnetic track. So you put that there. There's no real reason for the bits and bobs to hang out there except for the barrier, other than it makes the environment in the enclosure look a little bit more lifelike. The little barrier itself, the little cave it hides in, is kind of cute, but there's no real reason to have them there, really. I guess the one at the back is to protect anything from falling, like any of the water falling out if it moves fast back in the water, because it gets a little bit deeper at that end. But in any case, I love this virtual pet, or I guess it's not like a true virtual pet like a Tamagotchi or a Digimon, but it does have like some aspect of care. You have to befriend it. It's like a virtual companion that you have to like have a friendship with, which is really cute. So I do recommend this if you can get your hands on it. It warms my heart. So in any case, those are my thoughts on the Mutsu Water Looper / Mutsu the Curious Little Fish. As far as I can see, the US versions and the first generation of the Japanese ones are the same. I'm not 100% there, but from what I can tell on the internet, they are the same. The second generation, as I mentioned, different shape, has a remote control, and when you put the little Mutsu enclosures next to each other, they can talk and interact. That's not on the version 1. There's no interactivity on that first version. I'd love a second version, but I haven't been able to find one yet. But yeah, it's also kind of cute that the different figures exist for it, and there's a cute turtle one, a puppy dog, and there's just your typical Mutsu fish. There's also a Mutsu Game Boy Advance game, Mutsu GameCube game. Apparently it was a whole thing. But in any case, those are my thoughts on the Mutsu Water Looper by TOMY. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Any questions that you have about things I didn't cover, let me know. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and of course, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!